Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Zappsec Modernization Series. I'm Carl Schneider, Vice President at Zappsec, and I'm joined by Hitesh Kumar, who is our Senior Security Architect. So, in another session, I promised Hitesh we'd get a chance to talk about microsegmentation. And I have to tell you, the moment we finished that session, he didn't stop talking for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, look, microsegmentation is the thing I see the most money wasted on, right? More than SASE, more than XDR. And the reason is that the concept is right, but the execution pattern across most enterprises is fundamentally broken.
It's broken how? Because every CISO I talk to tells me they've got microsegmentation deployed, right? And it's like, look, it's on the slide, it's in the architecture diagram. NSXT is running, the project was funded, so what's the problem?
Yeah, so the problem is that having microsegmentation deployed and having microsegmentation that actually stops lateral movement are two completely different things. And
Um,
most enterprises have the first one, right? So here's the pattern. The organization, they buy NSXT or any other microsegmentation platform for that matter. And the network team builds segments. They define policies based on what they know, things like IP ranges, VLANs, port numbers, protocols. And maybe if they're advanced, they'd also throw in some workload tags. And they deploy it. They report to the CISO saying microsegmentation is live and lateral movement is contained. And then we come in for an assessment, and the first thing we do is simulate a compromised host inside one of those segments.
yeah, I'm dying to know what typically happens.
Well, the attacker inherits that segment's identity. Like that's the whole problem. In an IP-based microsegmentation, the policy trusts the network position, not the entity. So once I'm on a host inside that segment, I can talk to everything that host was allowed to talk to. So be it database servers, application tiers, shared services, the segment does not ask who I am, right? It only checks where I am, and where I am is exactly where the compromised host already was.
Okay, so wait, let me make sure I'm following this for the non-architects watching. The segmentation creates a boundary, but once you're inside that boundary through any means, whatever it might be, phishing, credential theft, vulnerable service, whatever, the boundary doesn't matter anymore, like because now you're trusted.
Exactly. Yeah, the boundary only filters what comes in from outside the segment. The internal communication paths are defined by the IP allow list, right? So if the compromised host is allowed to reach the database on port 1433, the attacker can also reach that database on port 1433. The microsegmentation policy sees a valid source IP making a permitted connection. So it has no way to know that the entity behind that connection has changed.
So basically, you just have a more expensive VLAN.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. More granular, yes, but architecturally identical, right? So the enforcement model is the same one we've been using since the 1990s. We just made the segment smaller and the industry marketed like, it was a paradigm shift.
Okay, so if the problem is that policy trusts network position instead of identity, walk me through what an identity aware model actually looks like. Like basically, what does Zappsec do? Because I want to know what changes for the CISO who already spent money on SXT.
Yeah, so the good news is you don't just throw out the NSXT, right? NSXT is still a great enforcement engine. So the problem is not the tool here. The problem is what is feeding it, right? In the IP model, the policy says source IP is, let's say, 10.4.12.0/24 can reach the destination of 10.4.15.10 on port 443. And that is a network statement. It says nothing about who or what is making that request. So, in an identity aware model, the policy will say more like a workload X verified by its service identity, whether it be through a certificate or a token, running on a host with a validated posture. Only then it can access application Y through an authenticated session. So now the enforcement is bound to the entity, not the address.
I see. And so basically, the critical difference is what happens when the host gets compromised.
Right, right, exactly right. So in the identity model, the attacker lands on the host, but they don't have the workload's cryptographic identity. They don't have a valid service token. So they cannot forge the posture attestation, right? So the enforcement point sees an unverified entity attempting to use an authorized path, and then it blocks it. So the segment is still there, and the segment is now identity aware. So it doesn't just check the address, it checks the credentials.
So the segmentation, it survives the compromise.
Correct. That is the test. And if your microsegmentation does not survive host compromise, that is not a security control. It's just network hygiene, right? It's a tidier network. It's not zero trust.
Okay, so here's where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of organizations because what you're describing requires that the segmentation team integrate with identity systems like PAM, CTNA, certificate infrastructure, workload identity platforms. And let's face it, in most
In
enterprises,
most cases, those are three different teams that
exactly.
don't talk to each other.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The segmentation lives like with the network team. Identity lives with the IAM team. Workload certificates might live with the platform engineering team or DevSecOps. But nobody's designed the integration architecture that connects those signals to the enforcement plane. So you end up with NSXT doing its job, and let's say CyberArk for argument's sake doing its job, your ZTNA doing its job, but none of them talking to each other. These are three capable tools producing zero architectural coherence.
Yeah, and that is the thing I keep on trying to explain to people, right? The technology is there. So NSXT, it supports identity-based groupings, and your CyberArk or whatever identity platform you have can publish that privileged context, right? And your ZTNA platforms, they can verify the sessions and the posture continuously. But someone has to design the integration model that wires those signals together and then feeds them into every enforcement decision. So that is the architecture at work over there. And that is what is missing, right? And so it's like the enterprise bought a car with lane assist, adaptive cruise control, collision avoidance, the whole deal, right? All the bells and whistles, but nobody enabled them.
Right,
So
right.
you're driving a very expensive car with none of the safety systems actually engaged.
That's a really good analogy. I think I'm going to steal that one for my next board presentation.
Yeah, go for it. Just make sure you tell them what it costs not to connect these systems, right?
Exactly, exactly. All right. So here's the takeaway, right? If you've deployed microsegmentation and your team can't answer the question, what happens to this policy when the host is compromised? Then you really just have network segmentation. You don't have security segmentation. And those are very different investments with very different outcomes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we have a segmentation architecture assessment that tests exactly this, right? So we simulate compromise inside your segments and measure what the attacker can still reach. It's not a pen test per se. It's an architecture validation. So you find out whether your segments survive contact with an actual threat. So if you want the assessment framework, comment segment below or reach out to the Zappsec team and we'll be more than happy to run this assessment with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Hitesh. This was really good. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, Zappsec helps companies modernize their infrastructure and security in ways that not only maximize the ROI, but also minimize the threats. Whether it's segmentation or identity and access management, we've been there, we've done that. If any of this resonates with you, we'd welcome a conversation on how to bring this sort of transformation to your organization. Visit zappsec.com or reach out to Hitesh or myself directly. Our email addresses are visible at the beginning of the video.